Okay, so here's a graphic you've seen before in one of the other videos I made a few weeks ago. Is to classify triangles. Just some things to keep in mind as we go forward with trigonometry. Here are the three different types of triangles you can name by side. And then over here, naming them using angles. Keep in mind that in any triangle at all the angles have to add up to 180 degrees. So if you know two of the angles, you can always get the third angle, 180 minus the other two. Also keep in mind that if you have an isosceles triangle, then the two angles that are at the bottom of the sides that are the same length are going to have the same degrees. So this angle here and this angle here are going to be the same. Very important. Equilateral triangle, all three will have the same angle, so they'll always be 60 degrees. And of course, a right triangle has one 90-degree angle, and acute is less than 90, and obtuse is more than 90. Naming sides and angles of a triangle, the convention is that we use capital letters for the angles. So A, B, C, X, Y, Z. It doesn't matter what letters, but always capitals for the angles, for the vertices. And then, so then you'd call this angle A, or you could call it angle BAC, but angle A is fine as well. And then to name the sides, you use the lowercase letter for the side, for the angle that it's opposite to. So this side over here, this angle over here is opposite to this side over here. So we're going to call this side A. And then angle B is at the top. So side B is here and side C is here. So always name it appropriately, whatever it's across from. And angles get the capital letters and sides get the lowercase letters. Here's the sine law. So this is the new information you're going to learn about on Khan Academy. It can be written both of these ways. So A over sine of A, which is an angle, keep this in mind, is equal to B, the side, little b, over sine of B, is equal to C over sine C. So, or you can flip all of the ratios here upside down and do sine on the top and A, B, and C on the bottom. So remember, sine is always to do with an angle, capital letters A, B, and C. Doesn't matter which version of the law you use. And the lowercase letters A, B, and C have to do with the sides, A, B, and C. What these mean is that the ratio of this side and the sine of this angle is equal to the ratio between this side and this angle. And it's also equal to the ratio of this side and this angle. And a ratio is just saying that they're proportional to each other. So the ratio between sine of A over A is equal to the ratio of sine of B over B, which is equal to the sine of C over C, or again, upside down, the other way, the reciprocal. You don't need to use all three. Generally, you'll have enough information to use two parts of it like this, and you won't care about the third side and angle. So you'll just use A and B, or you'll use B and C, or you'll use A and C, like that. It doesn't matter whether you put the side or the angle on the top, as long as the angle goes with the sine, of course, and as long as they're all sides are on the top or all the sides are on the bottom. And then let me just give you a very quick example of what one might look like. So let's say we had some numbers like this. 4 over sine of 30 is equal to 5 over sine of B. And we didn't know what B was. So then you just have a proportion here. So you cross multiply this times this is equal to this times this. And then you can solve for B using the inverse sine. Inverse sine of, let's see, it'd be sine 30 times 5 over 4, something like that. So B would equal that. You can obviously do it in a lot more steps than that, but just keep in mind when you have 3 pieces out of 4 for one of these things, then you have a proportion and you know how to solve that using cross multiplying. So the other law that's new this week is the cosine law. And it may look a little familiar, especially right about here, this part of it, it starts with the Pythagorean theorem, and it's basically the Pythagorean theorem for any angle that isn't a 90-degree angle. If you had a 90-degree angle for one of these and you put it into the cosine law, the cosine of this would be 0. You multiply all of this times 0, and you're subtracting 0 from all of this, which gives you the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Doesn't matter which side or angle you're talking about, as long as the one that you're solving for that's over here by itself is the one that goes with the angle over here. So a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of a. So I'd be talking about this side and this angle, or b and cos of b, this side and this angle, or this version, c and c. It doesn't matter what letters you have here, so these are all exactly the same thing. You don't have to memorize 3 different things. This and this have to match this, and this have to go together. So you're only looking at one angle here, and then 3 sides. There's also a rearranged version of the cosine law that I will show you. You'll sometimes see it written like, let's say c squared, or sorry, that's not what I'm trying to do. You'll see it written as like cosine of c, or any letter, doesn't matter, is equal to a squared plus b squared minus c squared over 2ab. So again, this one has to go with the one that's being subtracted here, and everything else is positive. If you're curious about how to rearrange that, I will maybe do that very quickly here. So I'm going to start with this one. So basically we want to get cosine of c by itself to solve for the angle. So I'm going to make this term positive by bringing it to the other side, and I'm going to make this one negative by bringing it over here. I'm going to do those in the same step just for the sake of space here. So I took this entire term, negative 2ab cos c, and I added it to both sides. So now it's on the left side. And then I'm going to take the c squared term and subtract it from both sides. So I end up with a squared plus b squared minus c squared. That made my cos of c positive, so I can deal with the rest. Now I'm going to divide by 2ab on both sides. So then I end up with a squared plus b squared minus c squared all over 2ab. You can either leave it like that or do cos is equal to the inverse, or sorry, c is equal to the inverse cos of a squared plus b squared minus c squared over 2ab. So you'll usually see cosine law written like the ones over here in the box, and sometimes you'll see it written either like this, like this, or like this. Generally, I would say this is an easier version to remember, the same one up here. Cos C or cos A or B or X or Y or Q, doesn't matter what you have here as long as it matches this one here, and these are the other 2 sides. So the one that's being subtracted on the top at the end is the one that goes with this side, and then these 2 sides are the same as these 2, and everything else is positive. Now, here's a quick rundown of when to use each of these things. So if you're trying to find information in a triangle, first thing you look for is it a right triangle? If it is, then stick with the easy things you already know how to do, meaning Pythagorean theorem, so a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If you have a right angle triangle and all you care about is the side lengths, Pythagorean theorem. You don't care about the angles, Pythagorean theorem. If you care about the angles, then you have to use what you learned recently, SOHCAHTOA, so the primary trig ratios. Sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse, cosine of the angle is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is equal to the ratio of opposite over adjacent. If it's not a right triangle, you don't have a right angle in the triangle, then your 2 options for solving anything in it are either the sine law or the cosine law. For the sine law, you need to have an angle pair, a side angle pair. So here's ABC, A, B, C. So let's say you know side A and angle A, and you know one other piece of information. It doesn't matter which other piece. It could be this angle, it could be this angle, it could be this side or this side. If you have a pair that goes together, a side and an angle that are opposite of each other, then you use the sine law to find the other pieces of information because it is the easiest. Cosine law is harder, more complicated, more room for mistakes. So use sine law whenever you can. The other time you would use this is if you already have two of the angles. So let's say we knew these two angles and we knew, let's say, this side. We don't have a pair, but if you know two of the angles, you can always get the third angle, which means you will then have a side angle pair. So use sine law. So all that leaves is basically two cases where you want to use cosine law because you have no other choice. One of them is if you are, I'm going to erase this and show you again. If you have a triangle and you know all three sides, so you know A and you know B and you know C and you don't know any angles. I like to call this one you're surrounded. So keep in mind, if you are surrounded, you have all the sides on the triangle and you don't know any angles, then you're going to use the cosine law. And the specific cosine law that you're going to use when you're surrounded, when you're solving for an angle, is that rearranged one that I showed you before. Cosine of capital C equals A squared plus B squared minus C squared over 2AB. Or you can use the C squared equals A squared plus B squared one and then rearrange it yourself when you have it done. But it will come in handy for you to memorize this one. The other option for for when you should use the cosine law is when you have a side, the angle beside it, adjacent to it, and then the other side. So you have SAS, side, angle, side. So it's two sides and the angle in between. So let's say you knew this side, and you knew this angle over here. I also think of this one as Pac-Man because you have little Pac-Man guy here. You know the angle, and you know this side, and you know this side. So if you have side, angle, side, or Pac-Man, you use the cosine law. C squared equals A squared plus B squared minus 2AB cos of C. So that is a very, very quick rundown of what the laws are and when to use them. Now go ahead and go to the Khan Academy videos and it will show you a whole bunch of examples of using them and things like that. If you have questions, come to the Google Meet and let me know, please.